Welcome to Ledger Editorial Board Interviews. I'm Glenn Marston. This interview, One Tough Question, Circuit Judge Group 7, was recorded June 28, 2012. With us are Larry Helms, William Bill Seitz, and Christine Trakas Thornhill. They are running for Circuit Judge Group 7 in the August 14th primary election. Here is one tough question for Larry Helms. Mr. Helms, what has been the most difficult decision by a circuit judge that you have observed, and could it have been improved?
I think that probably the most difficult decisions that I have observed a circuit judge having to make. There have been a number of difficult decisions, but almost all of them had to do with families and juvenile issues. I think that is a difficult thing for any judge to handle because the decisions that a circuit judge makes in a juvenile case, a dependency case, or delinquency case have such significant and long-lasting outcome. I have seen circuit judges struggle with the decision to take a child away from parents and to disrupt a family unit and to try to improve that situation, to give that child a better opportunity to have a future that they can be productive and proud of. And balancing that with the interests of the parents and their love of their children, which sometimes just wasn't enough to offset the needs that the child actually had. And I've seen judges struggle with that. As to whether or not those decisions or that decision could be improved on, in those particular cases, no, I don't believe they could have. The judge clearly did his job. He clearly listened to the evidence. He paid attention to the interests of all the parties involved. And then he made a tough choice. And that's sort of what being a judge is all about. So I think the judge did as good a job there as was humanly possible, knowing that whatever decision you make, you're going to have long-lasting consequences.
Here is one tough question for William Bill Seitz. Mr. Seitz, what is the most difficult decision by a circuit judge that you have observed, and could it have been improved?
At the risk of sounding unoriginal, because I think Larry brought up a good point, but I'm going to sort of follow suit because this is an event that occurred early in my career, and it did occur in juvenile dependency court, and it involved a judge that's now in the Second District Court of Appeals, Charlie Davis, but who at that time was a circuit judge. And it was when I was a young, or just starting out private practice, I'd gotten court appointed to do a dependency case. The client actually lived in Tampa, and it was a young woman with obviously a substantial drug problem. And this was a case where the child was being sought to be removed, and the allegations were drug abuse. And in that particular case, the reason why it stood out in my mind is that obviously I was advocating for my client. I felt that my client's position was that she wanted that child returned to her. She did have a drug problem. She did have a history of drug problems. the judge, and I consider Judge Davis a fairly conservative judge and very law and order oriented type judge. We went through a trial. At that time, it was Department of Health and Rehabilitative Services, which is now Department of Children and Families. Their lawyers put on their case. At the end of that trial, the judge did not rule in their favor, even though clearly everything that came forward indicated this woman had a drug problem, but they could not prove that that drug problem had impacted her care of the child at that time. And I think the hardest decision that I've ever seen was Judge Davis feeling that woman clearly had a drug problem, but also feeling completely obligated to follow the law as the law is written by the legislature. Made a very hard decision, but awarded that child back to my client. And so I had a great deal of respect for him for that, because I knew the easiest thing in the world would have been to say, go ahead and remove that child and give that woman a case plan. And probably because in juvenile court, no one's really looking over your shoulder that much. It's not a jury. There's not a lot of people down there. But he followed that law to the T and made a decision that he felt he had to because the law required him to. So I thought, that outside of capital punishment, I agree with Larry. I think juvenile dependency cases require the most courageous decisions from the judiciary for either the reasons Larry said, in terms of having to remove a child because it's in that child's best interest, but equally because you have to also follow the law and give that child back, even though you may not feel that that parent is the best parent for that child. So that stuck with me. That was probably early in the 90s, and that stuck with me ever since then. So I do not feel that I could have improved on that decision, because I would, even though my client won, I had honestly some misgivings about that person's capability of caring for the child. But under the law, that judge had an obligation to return that child, and he did the right thing, and he did the courageous thing, and I've never forgotten it.
Here is one tough question for Christine Trakas Thornhill. Ms. Thornhill, what has been the most difficult decision by a circuit judge that you have observed, and could it have been improved?
I believe that all decisions that judges make are difficult ones. They deal with criminal cases where not only do you have the defendant in the courtroom, but you've got the victim there also. In family law cases where you have two parents coming in and divorcing with minor children, and both parents are good parents and love their children and unfortunately can't work their marriage out, but they still want to be parents. And it's difficult for a judge to have to choose mom or dad, considering that they're both good parents and love their child. I also think that in dependency cases where the Department of Children and Families are involved, that involves issues of abandonment, abuse, and neglect. Those are difficult questions and difficult issues to resolve. I also think in civil cases with regards to homeowners associations or contract disputes between parties, every decision that a judge makes is difficult, because life is not black and white. Life has ups and downs, and it has two arguments, two sides to a story. But if I'm elected to become a circuit judge, then what I would be doing is bringing a decision, a resolution to the conflict. Sometimes people just want to get into court so that they can just be done with it. Let's finish this. And that's what I hope to bring, a finality to it.
This has been Editorial Board Interviews. Editorials appear daily in the Ledger and at theledger.com/editorial. Find Editorial Board Interviews at theledger.com/podcast.